This is a video review of The Last Jedi. In it, I explain why it's my favorite Star Wars movie, and briefly, why I'm worried about The Rise of Skywalker. The Last Jedi, directed by Rian Johnson, was, as most Star Wars fans know, the biggest box office hit of 2017, and it earned positive reviews from most critics. But audience reaction was divided, which puzzled me. I'm a first-generation Star Wars fan who saw the first movie, before it was called A New Hope, half a dozen times during the summer and fall of 1977, way back when I was 12. Now I'm 55 and still a Star Wars fan. But all of the Star Wars movies after The Empire Strikes Back, which I love, have fallen short of my high expectations, until The Last Jedi. In this video review, spoiler alert by the way, I'm going to explore 5 reasons, starting with Luke and finishing with Yoda, okay, with a slightly off-topic mention of Baby Yoda, why The Last Jedi is my favorite out of all of the Star Wars movies. Let's start with Luke Skywalker, because the development of his character in The Last Jedi has been controversial. Those who don't like The Last Jedi feel that Luke is tarnished by this movie. But I think Luke is redeemed in a meaningful character arc after suffering serious setbacks. Luke is now about the age of old Ben Kenobi during A New Hope, and in fact, Mark Hamill, during the filming of The Last Jedi, was actually slightly older than Alec Guinness was when he starred as Obi-Wan Kenobi. And before the movie begins, Luke has been trying to carry on the work of old Ben, and of Yoda, by training a new generation of Jedi. The Jedi are hanging by a thread in this movie, as they have been for all the movies set after the prequels era. But finally, this grim reality is more fully explored in The Last Jedi. In A New Hope, old Ben says,
For over 1,000 generations, the Jedi Knights were the guardians of peace and justice in the Old Republic. Before the Dark Times. Before the Empire.
The weight and subdued loathing with which Obi-Wan softly says the word Empire gives a sense of the weight of a tragic past. And this is part of what gives A New Hope its gravitas in the middle of its galactic adventures and heroism. This sense of a tragic past is also found in The Last Jedi, and now found in Luke. We find out in The Last Jedi that Luke, in trying to teach a new generation of Jedi, has failed, and failed in a way that parallels the tragic past of the Jedi Order. As Luke says to Rey,
"Now that they're extinct, the Jedi are romanticized, deified. But if you strip away the myth and look at their deeds, the legacy of the Jedi is failure. Hypocrisy, hubris.
That's not true.
At the height of their powers, they allowed Darth Sidious to rise, create the Empire, and wipe them out. It was a Jedi Master who was responsible for the training and creation of Darth Vader."
This capsule summary of the prequels is obviously true, and also why The Last Jedi is unsettling in a good way, because it explores honestly the good, the bad, and the in-between about the Jedi. From one point of view, the heroic Luke of the original trilogy is no more, but old Luke has wisdom from bitter experience about the deeper meaning of the Force. He helps Rey realize that the Force is much larger than the Jedi. During their brief lessons, Rey describes to Luke what she sees as she reaches out with her feelings.
The island. Life. Death and decay that feeds new life. Warmth. Cold. Peace. Violence.
And between it all,
Balance. And energy. A force.
and inside you.
Inside me. That same force.
And this is the lesson. That force does not belong to the Jedi.
In A New Hope, old Ben Kenobi begins to explain the Force, and Yoda, of course, deepens that explanation in The Empire Strikes Back. And finally, in The Last Jedi, through Luke and Rey, we get a meaningful further exploration of the Force. Why does this help make The Last Jedi my favorite Star Wars movie? Well, going back to when I was 12 and first watching Star Wars, or 15 and watching The Empire Strikes Back, along with millions of other first-generation fans, I sensed that there was sometimes something deeper, something sometimes even a little philosophical, that was a key part of Star Wars. Often that gets a bit lost in the action, the special effects, the merchandising, and the money that's inevitably also part of Star Wars. But Luke in The Last Jedi brings Star Wars back to a core of something that is more real, and which was part of what brought me and some other first generation fans to Star Wars in the first place. Okay, on to Rey. Because her character is a second reason why The Last Jedi is my favorite Star Wars movie. People who have issues with the new Star Wars movies sometimes talk about Rey as a Mary Sue character. A Mary Sue is a character who almost always wins and has greater abilities than other characters without much of an explanation. And as much as I like Rey and Daisy Ridley's wonderful portrayal of her, it is possible that this criticism might be partially valid, although really we can't know until we see The Rise of Skywalker, for gosh sakes. That movie, I'm almost certain, is going to try to explain her remarkable abilities and powerful connection to the Force. Anyway, as we all know, in the original trilogy, it's established that Luke is already a pilot, which sets up his abilities in the attack on the Death Star at the end of A New Hope. Luke also has extensive lightsaber training, and even then loses to Darth Vader in Empire and has his hand cut off. In contrast, Rey is able to expertly pilot the Millennium Falcon in The Force Awakens without an explanation in the movie of how she got those skills. And again in The Force Awakens, Rey is able to beat Kylo Ren in a lightsaber battle, seemingly without training, although we did see earlier in the film that she's good at battling someone with her staff, which is arguably similar to the skills needed in a lightsaber battle. And of course, Kylo Ren is still significantly wounded from a bowcaster bolt from Chewbacca. In any case, part of this problem, if it even is a problem, can be laid at the feet of J.J. Abrams, who is sometimes trying to create a narrative mystery box, the amazing things that impress audiences when first seen, and the explanations for which are left to be worked out later. The ending of the Lost TV show is one example of what can happen with this mystery box style of narrative. I'm doing this video a week before The Rise of Skywalker comes out, and I'll say a little more about my worries about that movie toward the end. But for good or ill, J.J. Abrams is going to have to finally reveal his explanation for Rey and her abilities in The Rise of Skywalker. But ultimately, I think the criticisms of Rey as a Mary Sue are way overdone. The victorious male hero, who wins over every adversary and over seemingly impossible odds, is very common, with James Bond and Indiana Jones being two examples. I think heroes of whatever identity can be inspiring and fun, and for me and for many others, Rey works as a hero. And this is the first time we've seen a female action hero headline a Star Wars movie. But what actually inspires me most about Rey is when she's struggling. In The Last Jedi, Rey struggles with who her parents are, what her identity is, and what her place in the story might be. Kylo Ren, portrayed in a powerfully creepy way by Adam Driver, tries to gaslight Rey, and almost like a contemporary pickup artist, tries to destroy her sense of identity by negating or negging her when he says,
"Do you want to know the truth about your parents? Or have you always known? And you just hidden it away? They're filthy junk traders who sold you off for drinking money. The dead in a pauper's grave in the Jakku Desert. You have no place in this story. You come from nothing. You're nothing. But not to me.
creepy. The interactions and conflicts between these two characters are central to The Last Jedi, and clearly are going to be a big part of The Rise of Skywalker too. The intensity and weirdness of Rey and Kylo's dynamic is like a train wreck you can't look away from. And nowhere is this more true than in the visually compelling throne room sequence. This gets to the third reason why I love The Last Jedi, the stunning production design, world building, and special effects, which are not just meaningless spectacle, but beautiful examples of the talents of the many filmmakers that meld well with the themes of the movie. Production design for The Last Jedi was overseen by Rick Heinrich and a huge team of talents, as seen in the film's IMDb credits. Anyway, the throne room set is haunting and nightmarish. And yet, it would just be an empty set if Rian Johnson, as writer and director, hadn't decided to place that climactic struggle between Snoke, Rey, Kylo Ren, and the Red Guards within it. The death of Snoke is shocking, and to me, shockingly good. Like many people, I went into The Last Jedi thinking that we wouldn't see the end of Snoke until Episode 9, and so, having him bisected by Luke's lightsaber, controlled by Ben Solo Kylo Ren, was nothing short of incredible. Rey had foreseen that Ben Solo would turn, and seemingly he has, and suddenly, Rey and Ben are plunged into stunningly choreographed combat, back to back against the Red Guards, and during which the spectacular throne set burns down. But Rian Johnson's not done. Vice Admiral Holdo, well played by Laura Dern, saves the rebellion by making her now famous sacrifice. Holdo intentionally jumps the rebel ship to light speed with insufficient fuel and bisects the First Order's flagship, just like its master a few moments before. The momentary silence during the special effects scene is impressive. I think the Oscar for special effects for 2017 should have gone to the team on The Last Jedi. It went to Blade Runner 2049 instead, which certainly has some good effects, but I just think that maybe some people take the excellence of Star Wars effects for granted sometimes. Anyway, along with the production design and effects, another thing that I enjoy about The Last Jedi is the world building. In his recent memoir, The Ride of a Lifetime, Lessons Learned from 15 Years as CEO of Disney, Bob Iger reveals that George Lucas, after he saw The Force Awakens for the first time, quote, didn't hide his disappointment. There's nothing new, Lucas said. In each of the earlier films, it was important for him to present new worlds, new stories. In this one, he said, quote, there weren't enough visual and technical leaps forward. And he wasn't wrong, Bob Iger admits. In my humble opinion, the judgment that George Lucas gave is too harsh, but there is a grain of truth to it. I think The Force Awakens does a good job of introducing new characters and continuing the old ones, and the movie is spectacular and fast-paced. I did have some of the issues Lucas himself had with The Force Awakens, but since it set up really well what's now my favorite Star Wars movie in The Last Jedi, I really like it. And The Force Awakens does have new worlds, but the problem is that Jakku looks too much like Tatooine to really feel new. But the worlds in The Last Jedi really do feel new, including Crate, Ahch-To, and most especially, and controversially, Canto Bight. At this point, you won't be surprised to hear that I really like Canto Bight, which is goofy and at the same time ominous, because the opulent wealth that glistens on every surface of that world ultimately flows from the weapons dealers who are selling to both sides and driving the gears of this galactic conflict forward. The fourth reason why The Last Jedi is my favorite Star Wars movie is the greater range of heroes and also villains. I love A New Hope and have since 1977, but even when I was 12, I noticed that the first Star Wars movie could sometimes have been more diverse. As a Star Trek fan back then, the greater diversity of the original Star Trek, 11 years before A New Hope, stood out. In the original Star Wars, the Wookiee, the androids, and all the aliens in the cantina are great. But when it comes to the main players, who I all love, of course, anyway. In The Last Jedi, even the baddies have a greater range, including fan favorite Phasma, played by Gwendolyn Christie. I'm also a fan of Rose Tico, wonderfully played by Kelly Marie Tran. Perhaps my favorite element in The Last Jedi was the return of Yoda, as a Muppet, wonderfully performed by the original Frank Oz. The way Frank Oz portrayed Yoda in The Empire Strikes Back made that character iconic. The decision to make Yoda CGI in the prequels certainly has some advantages, but I just prefer the reality you get when something isn't CGI, which for me and others creates more of an emotional connection. And the huge success of Baby Yoda in The Mandalorian, who is also not CGI, even though at first they considered doing Baby Yoda that way, shows that there's something special in a well-done character of this kind. In Empire, Yoda memorably says,
"Do or do not. There is no try."
those somewhat tough words have actually helped pull me, and I think many others, through a few challenges over the years. And in The Last Jedi, Yoda offers wise words about failure, and how that is part of life too, and how you can learn from failure and sometimes rise above it, as Luke heroically and yet peacefully does in his majestic fade out in this movie. Okay, there's a lot more I could say about why The Last Jedi is my favorite Star Wars movie, but that's enough for now. And I'd like to briefly say why I'm worried about The Rise of Skywalker. As mentioned, I like The Force Awakens, but I do have problems with two movies J.J. Abrams did for another sci-fi series that I'm also attached to. Some important choices J.J. Abrams made in his Star Trek movies, like destroying the planet Vulcan, along with the whole original Star Trek timeline, and reviving Khan, are things that I think are mistakes. But here's hoping that J.J. Abrams avoids major mistakes in The Rise of Skywalker, which I'm excited to see in just 1 week. As we end, I'd like to add that if you like what I hope has been some thoughtful movie commentary, I hope you'll consider liking this video and writing a comment, even if you don't agree with me. And please consider subscribing and hitting the bell. I'm hoping to create more Star Wars content as well as other content, and likes and comments help make that possible. Thanks, and may the Force be with you.